Okay, so let's talk about something that I think pretty much everyone has experienced, one way or another. Those little, almost pointless seeming lies between kids and their parents. You know, did you finish your homework? Yeah. Who were you on the phone with? Oh, just a friend. It can be so frustrating on both sides. But what if the reason for all these little lies isn't what we think it is at all?
So, I want to kick things off with a pretty direct question that comes from our source material. Just take a second and be honest with yourself. Does this ring a bell? Maybe it's happening now, or maybe it takes you back to when you were a teenager. The answer might even feel a little uncomfortable, but trust me, stick with me on this one. And look, here's the most important thing to get right off the bat. If you do this, or if you've done this in the past, it doesn't make you a bad person. Not at all. In fact, psychology offers this really fascinating explanation that has almost nothing to do with wanting to be deceitful. All right, so let's dig into this. We're going to start by looking at the standard interpretation. How do we usually look at this kind of behavior? Yeah, this is kind of the default setting for a lot of us, right? The logic is simple. Lying is bad, so a person who lies, even about tiny things, must have some kind of flaw in their character. It's a very straightforward judgment. But it turns out that way of thinking might be missing the entire point. So now, let's completely flip that on its head and look at a totally different explanation. What if we've been looking at this from completely the wrong angle? What if the lie isn't an attack, but actually an act of protection? This really gets to the core of the new idea. The act of lying isn't the main event here. It's really just the symptom of something bigger. The goal isn't actually to deceive. The goal is to build a wall, to defend a space that feels like it's under siege. And this is the key concept right here. The privacy invasion. It's that feeling you get when questions start to feel a little too personal, when your room isn't really your room, or when your own private thoughts don't feel so private anymore. And for a young person who is just trying to figure out who they are, this can feel like a genuine threat. What's so powerful here is the way this reframes the whole situation. Suddenly, the person telling the lie isn't the villain of the story. They're actually reacting to an outside force. It completely flips the script from "you're a liar" to "you're trying to defend your personal space." And that's a huge shift in perspective. So, where does all this tension actually come from? Well, it really boils down to a fundamental disagreement about what privacy even is. And this is where you see the two worldviews just clash. On one side, you have the common view that privacy is conditional. If you're responsible, then I'll give you your space. But the psychological view says, no, that's completely backward. It sees privacy as a non-negotiable ingredient for healthy development, just as essential as food or water. And that's why this is so critical. Think about it. We all need a private space, a sort of mental room of our own, just to figure out what we actually think and feel, totally separate from what everyone else wants us to think and feel. It's in that space that we form our own identity. Without it, it's really hard to build a solid sense of who you are. All right, so let's bring this all together. Let's look at the actual mechanism. How exactly does feeling like your privacy's being invaded lead to a lie about something totally random, like what you had for lunch? It's basically this simple, almost automatic chain reaction. First, there's that feeling of intrusion. Second, that intrusion feels like a direct threat to your emerging sense of self. And third, the brain just grabs for the fastest, easiest tool it has to stop the threat and put a boundary back up. And in this case, that tool is a small lie. So, you see, the lie becomes a kind of shield. The actual words, the lie itself, that's usually totally irrelevant. It's the function of the lie that matters. And that function is to say, nope, you can't come in here. This part is mine. It's a last-ditch effort to protect your inner world. And this is why all of this is so important to understand. Because when you see it this way, everything changes. Doesn't matter if you're the parent or the kid in this situation. It shifts the whole conversation away from blame and punishment and moves it towards a real discussion about boundaries, about trust, and about the fundamental need for personal space. It builds empathy. So that leaves us with this final big question. When we see these small, seemingly meaningless lies, are we actually looking at a failure of character, or are we just witnessing a clumsy but maybe deeply human attempt to protect one's own identity? Definitely something to think about.